Checking. Right, okay, so the sermon this morning is about loving our neighbour and caring for the world that we share in. And it's based on the passage in Luke 12, verses 16 to 34. I might shock you as I start the sermon this morning by telling you that in the past I have been ignorant, and I still am, on a number of subjects. By ignorant, I don't mean rude. I'm sure I've been that to some people sometimes too. Ignorance is lacking in knowledge or awareness on a particular topic. And I grew up in a working class home. We were not particularly materially wealthy, but we never starved. For many years, I was ignorant in the very fact that there were people starving in our world. When I first heard the phrase climate change, my reaction was the climate has always changed. We've had ice ages, we've had years of drought, we've had wet years with floods and so on. And that is true. I was ignorant on the crux of what people really meant by these two words, climate change. What people who are not ignorant on the subject really mean is that humans need to accept their responsibility with this amazing planet and its incredible resources so that we can look after it better for future generations. As Christians, surely we want God's creation to be cared for, to be treated well, in order that future generations will enjoy this amazing world responsibly. So today, while still in our Caring for the Planet series, we're also enjoying harvest celebrations. And we're giving thanksgiving for the fabulous produce that we get to eat. Think of the things that you most like to pop in your mouth, and as the flavours burst out. A raspberry came to mind there for me. I don't know what it was for you. But new life also comes during the seasons that we get to celebrate and harvest. Animals and children, new life. You see, God is a God of provision, rich provision, and a God who delights to bless all of us. God's provision includes the priceless fact that He sent Jesus into the world so that He can point us to look upward, to notice the stars and to gaze at the wonder of the universe, but also to gaze at who might have designed and created it all. Earlier in the week, I was watching a documentary about the planet Saturn, and the scientists sent up the Cassini probe to go and investigate Saturn and its many rings. They haven't got a number on the amount of rings that surround Saturn. It's so many, and they have learned so many things that they never knew. They've discovered new moons. We have a moon in our in our orbit in our planet, but in Saturn, they've counted over 60 to date, and every year they discover new ones. And they're discovering so many things that they just couldn't possibly have imagined beforehand. Saturn's so far away from the sun, they thought it was just really all a frozen mass. And in one of these small moons, that's only 20 miles across, they were absolutely certain it would just be solid, frozen, and out of it pops geysers of steam and water vapor. And that's blown their minds. How can that be so far away from the sun? And being so small, how is all the energy not dissipated when they think it's so many 100 billion years old? We're in this passage in Luke, and Jesus' teaching reveals wonderful things for us to learn about God. Sometimes Jesus spoke out against injustice. Sometimes he spoke up against leaders and those in authority. Sometimes he spoke out against sinful behaviour because it often causes all kinds of carnage in people's lives. In today's passage in Luke 12, Jesus speaks in the form of a parable. And a parable is a seemingly simple but memorable story, often using imagery that people can easily relate to, which contain a wise teaching that we might apply to our lives. A bit like a proverb, something that we're to learn from. And in this parable, we find somebody, a farmer, a rich producer at harvest time. And he's got a problem, and his problem is he's got too much produce. And in truth, all of us are in the top 5% of the world's richest people on the earth. Even the poorest in our country are so much better off than 95% of the people on the rest of the planet. Now, maybe when you heard that this farmer has got too much produce, you thought that's a nice problem to have. And so he thinks, well, I'll build myself a new, bigger storehouse. And in this parable, there's a hint that he's proud. He wants people to see his wealth. He wants to show off. He wants to knock down the old, smaller barns and show his status is growing, his wealth is greater. That's what verse 18 tells us. He's kind of patting himself in the back in verse 19 as well. He says, you've got plenty laid up for years ahead. Take your life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But he's unaware that God has numbered his days and that the number of his days is up that very night. We're given the lesson of the parable in verse 21. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. I don't know about you, but I think generally when people are younger, there's a desire to be progressive, to advance in their career, to get bigger houses, to get newer, nicer cars, to go on more exotic holidays and so on. As we get older, typically, we tend to have more than we need, and our needs are much less. We don't perceive the need to build bigger houses, but often we are thinking about downsizing and so on as the family has grown in the nest. But whatever stage in life we're at, this parable's asking us, what is it we're investing in really here? Are we rich towards God? And verse 22 takes us on further. He asks us if we're investing in that whole concept of material wealth and excess. And Jesus is asking us to see his perspective on it, a fresh perspective. I don't know, you're a worrier, but far too often people worry about things, material things, and they often give them a higher priority than they really ought to. New clothes, extra food, more than we need. And as long as we've enough, and as long as we trust that God will provide, we can learn that these temporal things are good and nice, but that they're really small fry when it comes to importance in life. We also should do our best to avoid ignorance, because many people suffer all kinds of injustices. And many people don't have these minor things that we take so easily for granted. So the parable teaches us a second lesson, that God is to be our highest, our first priority in life. Or we're like this foolish man who's only living for himself and his pride. There is no concept of the God who holds his life in the palm of his hand. Seek God's kingdom first, we're told in verse 31, and these things will be given to you as well. If we put God first, we don't lose out. We get everything else too. But we're living the right priorities. And when we live our lives, we become a blessing to others. Many who are less well off in all kinds of ways, physically or emotionally, materially, and spiritually. The verse 33 tells us, you don't need all these possessions. Sell them, give them to the poor, give the money to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that won't wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief can come and take, and no moth can destroy. And so the lessons in the parable are simple. They ask us, do we really love our neighbour? And our neighbour, according to one of Jesus' other parables, is every other person on the planet. Do we love them? Especially the ones that probably we could be the biggest blessing to, those amongst the 95% of the poorest on the planet. And when we're thinking about climate change and looking after the planet, are we living lives that help after others? Is the produce and the things that are important, is it being brought here where from places where people have practically been slave labour or are treated very badly in the work conditions and so on? Are causing the planet to be dug of its resources in such a way that we're exacerbating climate change? The whole forests are being removed and carbon is reducing and so on. So the question for us this morning is, what can we do? And do is an active thing. It's not just a wishful thing. And what can we do, not just as individuals, because lots of individuals banding together can make a much bigger difference. A few years ago, our Rwanda team, we have a partnership with a community, a church in Rwanda. They proposed, they bought a field so that they could grow food and help the poor there. And I know that that's been purchased and that they produce crops to help others in their community. And we as a church run a food bank, and the people who come are not just poor and struggle maybe to buy food, but they're in some sort of crisis in their lives, often psychologically and so on. Is there any more that we can do? And I suspect there's always more that we can do. There's an old chorus, I decided not to have it this morning, but the words this, and they'll know that we are Christians by our love, by our, yes, they'll know that we are Christians by our love. I wonder if anybody inspired this morning, anybody that thinks, yeah, let's do something tangible, even if it's just for the next year, or even if it's a different project every year. I wonder if others that might join together and form a wee team that will become activists, that will push us on as a church to fight against injustice, to look after the planet, and to help those in need. even more than we do at the moment. Let's distribute some of the wealth that we enjoy to bless others, to make them give thanks to our God. Amen. We're going to sing this hymn, When I See the Beauty, and then the very lovely Reverend Ian Coltart is going to come up and lead us in prayer.